Welcome to our first breakout session of the day. Thanks to everyone for coming, and we're excited to kick things off with the ultimate guide to Confluence for software teams. I'm thrilled to be able to introduce Sharif, our speaker this morning. And my fun fact about Sharif, he can tell you a lot more about his day job at Atlassian, but something to know about Sharif is that back in the early days of Confluence, there was a rule on the team where when you had a child during a release in your personal life, you had to create a ticket on jira.atlassian.com for your kid. So Sharif has 2 tickets on Jack for his 2 children, and the team likes to tell him it's the best thing he's ever shipped. So that's a fun fact about Sharif. Without further ado, here we go. Enjoy.
Thank you. Thanks for coming, everyone. This is the ultimate guide to software teams for Confluence. Now, Confluence is used for a lot of things. You can use it to plan projects, knowledge bases, social intranets, documentation, communities, and in a lot of different departments, whether it be IT, finance, legal, HR, recruitment. And so when I was thinking about this talk, what I wanted to do was just focus on a couple of things. I'm going to focus today on project planning for software teams. That's going to be my main focus. And I'm going to break this talk down into 4 key sections. This talk's going to be a lot of practical tips and templates, so don't get too paranoid about taking all those photos. The slides will be available, and I can send you stuff if you need anything. But we'll share Confluence for software teams and how you guys can use it to build better products and services in 4 phases. First of all, the inception phase, when you're gathering ideas and stuff. When you're planning and taking all those awesome ideas and actually trying to work out what are you going to ship and how you're going to execute. Then when you're in the middle of actually building it, how can you use Confluence to help you build better products? And lastly, I'll spend a little bit of time talking about how you can really tailor it throughout the whole process for yourself. So that's what I'm going to do today. A couple of things to note. Everything I'm covering today is for both cloud and server. So there's nothing that won't work on either, so don't worry about that. I'm going to show you most of the things I'll show you today will be a mix of 2 things. Out-of-the-box features, so those are things that you get when you just set up Confluence. And then I'll also show you some customized templates that we've created internally as well. And I'll call out which ones are custom and which ones are not. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix a lot of maybe software best practices, maybe some software agile frameworks, and mix them into the templates as well. So you will have a mix of like that as well as day-to-day stuff to help you ship products. All right, let's get into it. First up, the inception phase. You can use Confluence for a lot of things when you're capturing ideas, planning surveys, maybe interviews, or creating personas, which are a great way to help your team build better products. When I first did this talk, it went for like an hour and 20 minutes. So don't worry, you can go to lunch soon. So I had to cut this down quite a bit. So we're only covering 2 things here. I'll talk about how you can use Confluence to share interviews and do personas, 2 of my favorites. If you are interested in how you can use Confluence to capture ideas with blogs or Confluence questions and all that kind of stuff, or using Confluence to plan surveys, come and see me. I'll send you a bunch of templates, or email me or Twitter me or something at the end. I won't cover those 2 today. I'll just focus on the bottom 2 there. So let's talk about customer interviews first. Why would you use Confluence for sharing your customer interviews? Well, your team is probably doing a lot of research in some way and taking lots and lots of notes. Where Confluence helps here is it creates a central repository for all those notes so you can put them into one place and build on that shared knowledge for your team. And then from that, you get a lot of benefits. It'll be easy to organize and find stuff. Maybe you can start to identify opportunities and trends as you're building up this bit of a knowledge base of your customers and their needs. And lastly, hopefully you can turn all that insights into action, like turn it into backlog items that is actually changing your software for your customers. For us at Atlassian, we use a framework that we created called the Customer Interview Pyramid. I'm Egyptian, so I see everything in pyramids. But it's a pretty simple framework. At the bottom of this pyramid, we'll start from the bottom and work our way to the top, is communicating observations. So when you're doing any bit of research, the absolute minimum anyone should be doing is, hey, I saw the customer do this, and then sharing that with the team. Hey, customers do X, Y, Z. That's like a communicating observation. I saw someone do something, and this is what they do. But really, we're not getting a lot of value out of that as a team. We're just giving a lot of raw information. So the next step up from the pyramid is thinking about how can we take those observations and interpret them and group them into problems. Maybe we'll find, hey, we noticed customers do X, Y, and Z. Maybe those things relate to this particular problem. So you're kind of interpreting your observations and putting them into a problem. And lastly, at the tip of the pyramid, if you can turn that into an action or an opportunity, that's really when your team can actually move some work forward. So this is a framework you can think about. You can Google customer interview pyramid. We've written a lot about this publicly. But what we've done at Atlassian is turn this into a custom template. This is a custom template. It does not ship out of the box in Confluence, but you can create it very easily. And what I've got here is a customer called Applied Predictive Technologies. They're not here today, are they? I don't think so. They were very happy for me to share this with you, so I'm not sharing super private data. But this is literally an example of a customer interview we've had inside Atlassian. We got a little bit about the company, what problems we observed. So this is the middle layer of the pyramid. We took a photo of them and who's involved, etc. But that pyramid of observations, problems, opportunities is literally how we write our template. So we group it into problems. So the first problem is they were really having a tough time modeling the requirements process in Confluence. That's the problem. All right, what led me to conclude that was a problem? Then I share a bunch of observations that led me to conclude that was a problem. So I'm like, all right, I took a screenshot of their sidebar, and these are the things I talked about. And then at the bottom of that, I talk about, hey, what opportunities do we have to solve this for our customers? And this is where I mention people, maybe people in my team that are interested in this, or I link to related feature requests, and I'm trying to connect that with an opportunity. So the problem, the observations, and the opportunities. Kind of just rinse and repeat that. Make a lot of sense? Now, these interviews, we group them into a space, and this is our space template, if you like, for our customer interviews space online. It's pretty simple. We put them all in one space, and then we put the live search macro. It's a macro that lets you search all the content in the current space. And then we add this. I'm going to highlight a couple of, if you like, superhero Swiss Army knife macros. This is one of them. The create from template macro. Has anyone used this? All right, maybe a quarter of you. So allows, if you create any custom templates in Confluence, it allows your end users to create more instances of those templates. So when you click this button, you'll go and create a template of type customer interview, which we've created, and you can create more interviews in this space. And then a couple other things we do at the space level. So we use labels, and we label our customer interviews for different topics. So we'll label interviews about notifications or blueprints or whatever it is, and we'll label it, and that makes it really easy to dive in and come back for a particular topic. By the way, when we interview our customers, we also give them a label, and we label the customer like a persona. Has anyone here used personas before? Okay, a few of you. Personas are really just like a nice archetype or a summary of the kinds of customers that we're interviewing, and I'll talk a little bit about personas later. And then we have a section where we share the recent interviews. So these are like, hey, these are all the recent interviews we had. That's the content by label macro. So how do we do customer interviews? Very simply, we have two key templates. A customer interview template, and here it's very simple. You have the background and company info, and then the whole template is a rinse and repeat. We say, what's the problem? What are the observations? And what are the opportunities? Problem, observation, opportunities. And at the bottom, don't forget to do things like mention people, link to related Jira tickets, and use those labels to group that content. At a space level, we have a live search macro that summarizes all that, lets you search that space, the create from template macro that lets you create more interviews, and the labels list macro to list all interviews by topic. So hopefully you're doing all those customer interviews and you're turning all that insights into action. Check out the interview framework if you haven't seen already, the pyramid, customer interview pyramid, Google that, and the space and the page template. So you're doing all these interviews, and hopefully you're starting to identify these trends. These are the personas I talked about earlier. And these trends are like, oh, it looks like these kinds of users do these things. That's what really personas are. People use the fancy term archetypes because it makes them sound really cool. But a really good way for building a shared language with your team on the kinds of people that use your software. So at Atlassian, we use personas a lot to build that shared understanding. It really helps us focus our teams on the problem and the solution on the roadmap. Who are we building this thing for? What problems do they have? And can we make sure our roadmap is aligned for that particular persona? So we build a shared vocabulary. And if a lot of you out there work with marketing teams, it's a great way to work with marketing because now you have an understanding of who you're targeting for a particular release from the very beginning when you've built a shared understanding of that. So what do these personas look like? We literally have these persona cards. You can Google them and download a PDF of them. Our design team has created them. They're generalizations of the different kinds of users. We have Alana and Emma and William. Alana is very goals-driven. William is very tactical and wants to get things done. And on the back of the cards is a set of like things that we need to think about when we're designing a feature or solving a problem, of how this person thinks and how this person feels. There are little good ways to prompt your team for this kind of stuff. Now, we obsess over personas in our San Francisco bathrooms. They're on the walls, which is really kind of creepy when you're there. I'll tell you what's even more creepy, when you're the guy standing there taking the photo and someone walks into the bathroom and you're like, oh, sorry. It's for a talk, I promise. But yeah, we have personas, and they're grouped into a space. So this is our space template, if you like, for personas. So we've created a persona space. We have like a little bit about the personas, how to use them, links to guides. And then we just have, for each persona, an image and a link and maybe a key call out. If I open up one of the persona templates, they're very simple. We have the key quote for this persona. We have these like Alana's attitudes on the right, like, how does this person think and feel? So you get a very quick glance of like, okay, for these kinds of users, this is what they're thinking and feeling and doing. Their goals and their motivations and that kind of stuff. Now, what's cool here is, you'll see at the bottom I've got recent interviews. Sorry, I've had to blur some of them out. But remember those labels that I told you about earlier? So if I've interviewed someone and it's someone like Alana, I will label that customer interview template Alana. So when I come back to Alana's persona, I can see anyone in the whole company that's interviewed people like Alana, because that's basically the content by label macro, and it gives me all the content for Alana. So it's a really handy way to kind of close that loop. So you're doing those interviews, building a taxonomy around it, and then coming back to them. So the template's pretty simple. For the persona page template, it's like a photo and a memorable quote. Maybe those attitude sliders are a nice visual way to communicate how someone thinks and feels. About section, a behavior section. What are the questions your team should be thinking about when they're building software for this kind of user? And you could do the recent interviews with a content by label if you're using labels there. Space template is pretty simple. Some way to introduce your persona, a snapshot of each persona, and link to recent interviews if you want. So personas are great. If you don't use them, hopefully maybe I've given you a little bit of encouragement to check them out. Check out, you can Google personas, there's so much stuff written about them. But it's very easy to create a space template and a page template. So if we're doing those personas, we're doing that customer research interviews, and then we're creating personas for them, what I'll share with you later is how we can reference those personas when we're actually writing specs and talking to our teams about them. So there's a lot of things that Confluence can help software teams in the inception phase. I didn't talk about capturing ideas and planning surveys, but if you're interested in sharing interviews and personas, check them out. And again, if you're interested in the top 2 topics, come and grab me afterwards or email me or something, and I'll get you some information there. All right, so next up, the planning phase. You've done some research, you're ready to start thinking about, all right, what are we planning, what are we going to build, how are we going to build it? And Confluence can help with a lot of things here. This is probably the main thing Confluence helps with in a software development lifecycle. Everything from planning workshops and offsites to communicating strategies, high-level roadmap plans or release planning and team scheduling, and then probably the primary use case is aligning your team around requirements. Again, there is so much to cover here. I'm not going to cover the first 2 topics. I'm going to spend time on how to use Confluence for high-level roadmaps, team schedules, and aligning on requirements. If you're interested in the other 2, let me know. High-level road mapping. Why should you do it? Really simple. Align your stakeholders. Get them aligned. Give your team confidence in the rough direction you're going. People want to know where you're headed. And also link for more details. If people want to learn more, the roadmap's a great place to start, and then they can go and learn more. Now, before I dive into roadmaps, this is a whole topic in itself. I have given a talk about this, the art of building a roadmap. You can Google it or go to bit.ly/building roadmaps. Roadmaps are far more than those Gantt charty type bars that everyone draws. So I don't want to rabbit hole down that topic, but please check out this talk. This is one of many ways you can do a roadmap, is draw those bar charts, but there's a lot of other ways. So I'm just going to show you one way to do that. And there's a whole talk in itself on roadmaps, so check out the talk if you want to learn more about that. So at Atlassian, using Confluence, we have the roadmap macro. Do you guys use this? Have you heard of it? All right, about a quarter. For those that haven't, it's pretty simple. It's a macro, lets you draw a roadmap visually in our product. You can draw lanes. So like to communicate a theme of work, those are the big rows. Then you have bars, and they could be maybe your projects or maybe your epics. Markers can leave marks, and you can link to details. Now, this is not about accuracy. It is a high-level plan. People have asked us, oh, can we add a day view to this, etc. This is not the tool for that. It's a very high-level picture for your stakeholders or for the rest of your team. What does it look like? It's pretty simple. You literally just draw these bars and charts. Now, this can be for a project, it could be for a team, it could be for an epic, it's totally up to you. A bar could represent any unit of work. It could be a big piece of work, like a whole stream of work, or it could be maybe an epic in Jira, or whatever it is you like. And don't forget to link to pages for more detail. So link to a spec, or link to a project poster, or whatever it is for more detail. You can put these markers to set some milestones, whether it be some date you're aiming to plan to release for or whatever it is. So you've got lots of different ways you can use it. All right, so how do people use it and what do they put it in? We'll see a lot of pages like this. A lot of teams will create a page that's like a roadmap planning page. And in there they'll have the roadmap, they'll have some important links. And at the bottom of the page they'll have like a plan of attack sort of table, which is, we've got this big picture. All right, how do we get there? Who's responsible for what? So you'll see a lot of teams create a table with the items of who needs to do what and what the status is, and then a link to a page for more detail. So high-level road mapping, very simple, a great way to align your team and give them the general direction. Please do watch the art of building a roadmap if you haven't seen that already. There is a whole topic in that. The roadmap macro, the most practical thing you can do tomorrow is, if you haven't tried it, go to the Confluence editor, go insert macro, and search for roadmap, and give it a go if you haven't already. And you can embed them in strategy or planning pages or whatever you like. Now, all that road mapping is pretty awesome, but what about scheduling the day-to-day stuff that your team is doing? Or maybe the release plans that your team has? So roadmap planning is very different to release planning. The release planning is very tactical, much more granular than a roadmap plan. And the challenges you have is you have a lot of fluid teams. Teams are always coming and going, and there's a lot of events and stuff happening around a team. You need to take them into consideration when you're planning dates and schedules. So how do you bring all these contexts into one place? Whether it be like a social event that your company has, or an outage, or people are traveling, or on leave, or whatever it is. Now, Confluence has an app in the marketplace called Confluence Team Calendars. You guys use that, Team Calendars? A few of you? Yep. Team Calendars is just a really simple tool to help your team align on your people, your projects, and your events. And when you put them all together, you get a nice picture of where your team is at. So this is what it looks like. For every space, you can have a calendar, or you can have multiple calendars. Or you list all the types of events on one side. And if you take a closer look, you can have different kinds of events. So events for leave and travel plans. Hey, I'm traveling to Barcelona this week. I'll be out of the office. Or events from Jira, which is pretty cool. So did you know you can actually plot your Jira releases in Team Calendars? And when you drag them in Team Calendars and you want to reschedule a release, it'll send a notification and it'll update in Jira dynamically. So you can do that. You can also put your Jira issue dates. So some of you use Jira issue due dates. Some of you have custom date fields in Jira. You can also plot them in the calendar here. And if you have two dates in Jira, let's say you're an IT team and you're using Jira for change management. Some of you I've seen have a Jira date that's start outage date and end outage date. You can plot them in a what's the word I'm after? You can plot them you can plot the duration of that event, like in a bar chart sort of thing. So you can see the outage start is this time and the outage end is this time. And then you can capture any event. Team Calendars has the ability to create custom events. So you can upload an icon, give it a name, so you can have company-wide training or IT outages or people on holidays. It's totally up to you. When you put this all together, you get one picture of where your team is at, and this integrates with your calendaring tool. So if you use Outlook or Google Calendar, you can subscribe to your team calendar, so you can overlay that over your personal calendar as well. So if you haven't checked out Team Calendars, check it out. It's a simple way to align your team on your projects, events, and the people around you. And you can go, one of the things people love is adding custom events. So for whatever it is that your team does, outages, social events, training, etc. So that's aligning your release schedule, and we've done high-level roadmaps. Now let's get to requirements, right? You're about to go and actually define what it is you're going to build. Hopefully, you're thinking about requirements, a really useful way to align your team and your stakeholders. gives you confidence into where you're headed. And the awesome thing about requirements in Confluence is that you can link to anything. Link to designs, link to more pages, link to past research, and connect to details. So before I jump into requirements, just like roadmaps, I am actually not a big fan of requirements documents. I've written a lot about this. I think our goal as software teams is really to build a shared understanding with our team of our customers and their problems. There are many ways you can do this. If you always go towards one way, a requirements document, if I read the document and someone else reads it, you've probably got two different interpretations already. So there's a whole talk about requirements planning. But in many, I'm not going to dive into detail. Check out the talk if you want to learn more about it. But in many scenarios, you do have to put pen to paper and actually write requirements. We all know software doesn't age very well. So if you've got software that's been around for 10 years, there's a lot of edge cases you need to think about. Or in this scenario, we need to think about this. In that scenario, we need to think about that. Sometimes you have to put pen to paper. And when you need to do that, Confluence is really great for that. So Confluence ships with a out-of-the-box requirements blueprint or template that's available for you. And it looks like this. It's pretty simple. Now, at the top here is our second superhero, Superman, super wizard macro. It's called the page properties macro. I'm not the best at naming. I totally regret giving it that name. I apologize. Who uses the page properties macro? All right, awesome, most of you, great. Page properties macro, very quickly for those that don't use it, it's a great way to define a set of attributes on a page that you want to report on somewhere else. So what I'm doing here is I'm defining the target release, what epic this is for, who's the owner and status, and you can add as many rows to this as you want. So if your company's process, you need a cost center to capture for every requirements document, add a cost center row, it's totally up to you. You can link in your requirements documents for context. So all that research and interviews that you've been doing earlier, hopefully you're linking to them here. And if you read our user stories, I don't know if you can see that small font, we're linking our user stories to the actual persona. So I say Alana wants to sign up via Facebook in that first row. So we're closing the loop here. So anyone that's reading the document can have a better picture of who is Alana. All right, oh, there's an Alana persona page. I can read about that. And when they're on the Alana persona page, they're like, oh, there's actually requirements documents, customer interviews about Alana. I'm going to read about Alana's customer interviews. So you're kind of closing that whole loop here. And this is where really the power of linking comes in. And again, you can put anything here. So if you're working with designers can share designs on the same page. You can collaborate and comment on the images and the designs and give feedback to your team that way. And make sure that everyone's sort of aligned into what you're building. Now, that page properties macro defines a set of properties. And what Confluence does when you create your requirements document is it creates a page on top of it called the index page. And it gives you a summary of all the requirements in this space. How does it do that? It uses a macro called the page properties report. Fancy names, I know. And it summarizes that stuff that you defined in the table at the top here. And you can choose the columns you want here. It gives you some defaults out of the box. So we've got the title, who owns it. So at a glance, for my particular project, I can see where each spec is at, who owns it, and what target release are we doing, are we targeting this. Again, you can customize all of these columns to be whatever you want. It's a simple table. It's very easy. So whatever business process you want to model, you can do that here. Now, if you're using Confluence for requirements, you should definitely check out the marketplace. There are so many apps in the marketplace to help you with the requirements documents, whether it be diagrams, charts, mockups, sequence diagrams for the engineering types. There's a whole heap of apps in the marketplace, so go check them out. Now, hopefully you're creating requirements and getting a better understanding with your team as to what you're building. And at some stage, it's usually quite an informal step. Someone decides we're putting items in our backlog, right? And this step is a very tedious process because some poor soul has to come back to the requirements document and work out, all right, am I creating a ticket for that? What am I creating? And then go back to Jira and create those tickets manually. Now in Confluence, you can highlight any bit of text and you'll get this little highlight panel up the top there. And if you click on the Jira icon, what you can do is create Jira issues for the text that's in Confluence automatically. So when you do that, what that'll do is, in this particular example, it'll create a Jira issue in Jira for the Facebook integration story that I've created there. But I'm in a table here, and Confluence picks that up, and it's got a little link up the top that says, create multiple issues from this table. So if I click that, I can now bulk create a bunch of stories from Confluence that'll automatically get created in Jira and link those Jira stories back to the requirements document in Confluence. So no matter which way your team comes to this, they get the complete picture of the requirements and where it's transitioning, etc. And you can map the fields here. So I've got the summary column and the description column mapped to these Confluence fields. So when I hit create, the page gets updated. You'll notice at the top of the page, we've got, it says 6 Jira links at the very top, so it gives me a nice summary. And in my user story column, the new Jira issues macro has just appeared. So it's created them in Jira, linked them back to here, and now I'm getting the two-way reporting for that. So no need to copy and paste and all that stuff. It does it all for you. If I go to Jira, I'm in Jira now. If I open up the issue, it's linked those requirements back straight in my story. Pretty neat. So it's very easy to do. Now, if I go to my backlog view, Confluence is smart enough, for those of you that use epics. I'm actually curious, who uses epics in their, oh, wow, okay. I speak to a lot of customers that don't use epics, so I'm glad you guys do. Confluence is really smart enough. If you've referenced an epic in your requirements page, it goes, aha, so I'm going to create 6 stories. Well, it doesn't actually say aha, I just added that for a bit of effect. But it says, I'm going to create 6 stories, and I'm going to link those stories back to the epic, and the epic will link back to the requirements page. So here it's updated the epic and going, there was a related Confluence page for this, and it just links that. By the way, you can link the other way around. So if you're in Jira and you've already created your epic, you can come here and go create a link and link back to Confluence. So it's a nice little pretty circle there. So using Confluence requirements is great to help your team get on the same page. You can embed lots of rich content and give your team context. Again, I really think the power here is linking. I know it sounds really trivial, but if you think about all the research you've done, and if you bring that in Confluence, your interviews, your personas, your designers, your engineering architectural plans, you can really get a whole picture in one place. And it's very easy to move from requirements to backlog with the ability to highlight and create your issues there as well. So there's a lot that we've covered in planning. I've talked about high-level roadmap plans, team scheduling with team calendars, requirements, template, and Confluence. If you are interested in the other 2 topics, come and chat to me or whatever. We can share some other stuff. All right, the next step in the process is build. Hopefully you're finished some plans, or you have good enough plans that you're ready to proceed to the next step. Confluence is quite useful here in a few things. During the build phase, there are lots of meetings. Status meetings, retrospectives, ad hoc meetings to decide on particular things. You're probably making a lot of decisions during this phase because you think you've written this awesome requirements document and defined everything so well. Then the engineers start and go, Sharif, you didn't think about this thing. Oh, we need to make another decision. So decisions are happening throughout your whole software process. It's not just at the start. And then at some point, some stakeholder asks you, the poor soul, to report on the status of these things. Where is this thing at and how's it going? So Confluence can help in all these things. I'm not going to cover meetings. I think most of you probably know there's already a Confluence meetings template. There's a retrospectives template, a bunch of other meeting templates if you're interested. I'm going to cover decision-making in Confluence and how you report on that progress that your software team is doing in Jira back to the rest of your organization. So decision-making. Why should you do it in Confluence? I guess the first thing is really when you see someone's well-thought-out thinking, you get a lot of confidence in the decision that was made. The second thing you do is you build a shared knowledge. I don't know the amount of times in a growing organization, I've had someone walk up to me and ask, hey, Sharif, why did we do blah, blah, blah in Confluence? And usually I say, just blame me, it's my fault. But I can often find a decision page where we discuss this in length and send someone a link and get all that context in one place. So if you think about it, I'm actually just making my job easier because I don't have to speak to that person. I can just send them to the page and they can learn more about it. And another thing it's important for is aligning stakeholders. Your stakeholders are often a mile out of your context and don't have enough time to scramble through 20 or 30 different emails to understand how a decision was made. If you send them to a central place, they can understand that. A little bit of framework 101 on decision making. There's a way of thinking about it which is about a tree. Anyone heard this framework, the tree framework for decisions? No? Okay, cool. It's very advanced and scientifically driven. It's pretty basic, actually. At the top of the tree, you've got leaf decisions. These are trivial decisions. They're actually really hard to reverse. For those decisions, it doesn't matter too much if you get them wrong. And what you want to optimize here for this is speed. Your team should be moving as fast as possible with leaf-level decisions. You should not be debating or having meetings about this. Then on the opposite end, you have trunk-level decisions. These are hard to reverse, expensive decisions. Now, you want to really optimize your process here for deep thinking. If you get this wrong, it's probably going to cost your company time, people's time, or maybe it may be tough for your customers. There may be a bit of an impact for your customers. Now, somewhere in the middle, you've got branch-level decisions. I don't really know what to do with the branch-level analogy, so we'll just leave that. Basically, you've got the simple decisions and the hard decisions. Now, Confluence ships with the out-of-the-box template called the Decisions template, and it's based on a framework that is called the DACI framework. DACI, it's the decider, the approver, the contributors, and informed. So just a nice little framework to think about doing that. Now, this is not for leaf-level decisions. If you're writing one of these pages for like, hey, should the button color be red or blue? It's probably a little bit too heavyweight, right? This is for trunk-level decisions where you need to think deeply about a particular problem. Now, again, a reminder, this is using the page properties macro. Model this, don't get caught up in the template. Model this template for your team's culture. If you need a cost center or an approver or 2 levels of approvals, add it to the framework. You can edit these templates at a space level or at a site level. It's totally up to you. If you don't like one of these fields, just remove it. But this is the DACI framework, and this is a decision page. This was a trunk-level decision that I was involved in a couple of years ago. Some of you said you use team calendars, and there used to be a macro called the RSVP macro, and we debated ages or not if this RSVP macro should be bundled in team calendars or not. It had a lot of customer impacts to you guys, as well as a lot of engineering impacts, etc. And so we created a DACI page for it, a trunk-level decision. And we talked about it, and we did research, and we discussed, and we explored options. This is a very common pattern I see in a lot of decision pages where someone's gone option 1, option 2, option 3, and you're having a good, healthy debate and discussion around these things, and teams are commenting on them, etc. And then a recommendation at the end. And then a set of actions. All right, now that we've recommended, what are the actions? And hopefully your team's discussing this and moving forward with it. By the way, has anyone been to the team playbook stall up in the hall? If you haven't, you can go there. They have some of these plays set up. So if you're interested in how to do a better decision-making in your team, go up to the team playbook stall. I think it's called the team playbook stall. And you can go learn more about it there. Again, those page properties that you've defined on your DACI up the top, the deciders, the approvers, remember that table? It gets summarized for you here as well in the index page. So these are all the decisions for this space, or this project, or whatever it is. Again, you can edit this page, choose the columns you want to display, and change it to meet your needs. So hopefully you're inspired to go and try making better decisions with your team with the decisions template. Work together with your team to explore those options, and don't forget to tailor it to fit your needs. And a reminder, this is for trunk-level, hard-to-reverse decisions. All right, you're making decisions, and hopefully your team's making progress, but how do you communicate that progress to everyone outside your team? In Confluence, you can do that a lot. You can all report on all the Jira stuff in Confluence and collaborate with your team, maybe ask questions about the status of things, and share it with the rest of your organization. How do you do this? There's 2 big Lego blocks that will help you. There is the Jira reporting templates and the Swiss Army knife, the Jira macro. Let's start with Jira reporting templates. We ship out of the box 2 templates, a change log and a status report. Change log and status report, to help your teams quickly communicate something. Changelog grabs a list of Jira issues, could be a filter, a search, a project, you decide what issues you want, and displays them statically, so it captures a snapshot of their status into Confluence. So that next week, that page hasn't changed. It's during this time, this was the status of these issues. The status report, on the other hand, is dynamic. It's the current state of the project is like this, and it's always updated as you update Jira. When you hit create in the Confluence dialog, you can pick Jira report, and you have 2 types of reports. If I pick the status report, it's pretty simple. I pick my project, I can pick a version, or if you switch to advanced, you can put any Jira search filter or query. Creates my page. This is the dynamic one, and then gives me some out-of-the-box templates and macros to help you get started. Again, this is to help you get started. Feel free to modify this template for whatever you need. It shows you how to use the Jira chart macro or the Jira issues macro or whatever you like. On the other hand, the changelog report, remember, this is the snapshot. It gets that search that you gave it, whether it be the projects or issues or version, and then captures them for the current time. This Jira issue was this status, and this is the description. So maybe this one's more useful for things like release notes or a changelog, where the other one's more like, hey, come back to this page regularly to stay updated on the project. So choose which one works for you. So there's the two things to check out, Jira reporting templates and the Jira issues macro. The Jira Issues macro, it's a pretty awesome macro. In the editor, you can go insert Jira Issues, and you get this dialog. You can search for anything here. You can paste the link to a Jira search or just a basic search. You'll get a list of issues. Now, the cool thing is this little display options at the bottom. So if I press that, you can display the results in a wide variety of different ways. If you only want to display one issue, and you've only selected one issue, you can put it as a single issue. You can put a total issue count. So if you want to say, there are 100 issues remaining in this release, you can write that in a sentence case, and that 100 will keep getting dynamically updated as the filter changes. Or if you want to display it as a table, choose all the columns you want and display that as a table. So lots of different ways to use the Jira Issues macro. So Jira reporting and Confluence is like a match made in heaven. Who would have thought you could get excited about Jira reporting in Confluence? You check out the changelog and status reports, the Jira Issues macro. And don't forget, by the way, you can copy a lot of the URLs, your browser URL from Jira and in Confluence, and it'll do that for you. So if you are on a Jira filter and you copy it and you paste it, it'll create the Jira Issues macro for you and embed that automatically. So if you haven't tried that, just copy the link in Jira and paste it in Confluence, whether it be a search or a Jira issue. And it'll do that. So lots of things we talked about in the build phase, mostly on decision making and progress reporting. And check out the out-of-the-box templates for meetings. In particular, we have a retrospective one and a meetings template as well. You can go check them out. All right, the last step I want to talk about is I've given you a bunch of templates that some we've built ourselves, some which are out of the box. The beauty of Confluence is you can customize everything. It's very, very easy to do whatever you want. So I want to talk about how you can tailor it. And there's 2 ways you can tailor it. Number one, all those templates I showed you, you can modify whatever exists today. And that's done at a space level or at a site level. And 2, you can create your own templates and your own little processes. So I'll show you how to do both. For modifying your template in space settings, if you go to the cog and then click on space settings and content tools, you can go modify any of the out-of-the-box templates. So you want to change that decision template, you want to change the requirements template to do whatever you want, go ahead and do that. Don't forget, if you're an admin, you can do that at a site level so that everyone in your site will get those changes. Or if you want to do it project to project, you can do it at a space level. You can change the page properties macro to choose the different fields you want to display for that particular decision or requirements document. And you can also use labels any way you like. So you want to group that content any way, just use a different label and use that content by label or maybe the page properties report macros that I talked to you about to report on that. Now that you've created your template that way, don't forget you need to create that reporting page that I talked about. So you may create this reporting page to summarize the list of, let's say, change management things you have in your space or the list of designs you have in your space. So use this one, you want to use the page properties report macro. And that's the one that reports on that label that I just told you about. So you're creating a page with a label and you're using another page that's using the page properties report to report on that label. And if you want that other, create another button, you know the customer interview example I showed you. So create another interview, create another whatever it is, use the create from template example. So let me give you lots of examples of this. So I've gone on our internet and I've searched for pages that use these macros just to give you a feel of the different use cases. Our growth team use page properties and page properties report to have a list of all the experiments that they're running and report on them. Our customer support team have used the page properties and page properties report to list all the projects that they're working on in their space. And then here they've also got the ticket and the status and the description. These are all dynamically generated reports from their templates that they've created themselves. This is the status page team. They did a lot of lunchtime conversations with customers. And I found this, and they were working with trying to understand why do people use status page and what can we learn from them. And so they created the page properties and page properties report, and they had a standard interview template, and they said, all right, when you go talk to a customer, use this template. For Summit, as in this conference, this is one of the designers that was working on a lot of the artwork for it. So he used the page properties report here. At the bottom there, you can see profiles, and he's got basically for each design he's working on, what's the status, and what version is that releasing in. So Alex went ahead and did that. Or if you're an IT team, I've seen a lot of IT teams use Confluence this way. They'll create maybe a run book. You guys know what run books are? Yeah, cool. So like, what to do when the server's down or how to install this thing. So they'll create a run book template, and so you can go create another template. That's the create from template macro. And then they'll list all the run books in this space. or our security and IT team also will use it for different operations procedures. So they have like different ways to do integration with our internal tools. They've created a template for that, and there's a page that reports on that. Hopefully you're getting a lot of ideas now. Or for Summit, all our track leads created this. So they were planning all their talks in Confluence. So they created an index page that had basically what was the talk, is there abstract done, what's the audience, who's it for, etc. Who are the speakers, and this is what the page looked like. It was pretty simple. This is my page for this talk. Funnily enough, it looks like, by the way, my storyline and my deck are not finished. Kelvin, you didn't update that. That was your job. Terrible. But you get the idea here, right? So you can create your template here, and then you can report it in one place. You can use this for any business process that your team is working on. So that's it from me for Confluence for Software Teams. We covered a lot of things here. So for the planning phase, try out customer interviews. That was a custom template, and personas as well, if you can go learn more about them. For the planning phase, use the roadmap macro if you haven't seen that already. If you haven't tried team calendars to schedule your team, give that a go. And don't forget the best use case Confluence is for is really requirements and getting your team aligned. During the build phase, we've got the very important trunk level decisions you need to make, and then report on that progress for the rest of your team and your stakeholders with all the Jira reporting capabilities. And lastly, you can roll your own any of these templates. It's totally up to you. So the Lego pieces to remember are the templates, page properties report, and that create from template macro. So a huge thank you from me. Really appreciate your time and enjoy the rest of your summit.